Sota, DAF YOMI, spiritual energy, Tumah and Tahara. And Tumah and Tahara is a part of the Torah that many of us tend to avoid. It's complicated, we don't understand it, and we kind of skip through it. So I had to really decide, are we going to talk about something light and easy on these dapim, or are we going to use it as an opportunity to at least become familiar with what Tumah and Tahara is about, and not just skip over it. Shas, the 6 sections of the Talmud are divided, as you know, each one has a name. So it starts with Zeraim, which deals with agricultural law, and then we have Moed, which deals with time, seasons, Yom Tov, and then we have Noshim, deals with marriage and divorce, Nezikim deals with business law, finances, and then we have Koshim, which deals with the Beis HaMikdash, and Taurus, which deals with these laws of Tumah and Tahara. And the Maran explains that each section of the Talmud gets more and more spiritual. You start with agriculture, that's very physical, it's the land. And then we get into time, seasons, and that's dependent on the sun and the moon. You're dealing with something a little bit more remote from the human, the day-to-day life of the human being. And then we get into Nashim, which is more conceptual, the relationship between men and women, and what that entails. And then we get into Nezikim, which is business, which is still more conceptual, it's ideas, and then into Kochim, and ultimately into Tahara, which is the most ethereal, most spiritual of all the sections of the Talmud. We don't have Talmud Bavli on Tahara. Tahara is scattered throughout the Talmud, but we don't have a section of Talmud Bavli on Tahara because they didn't deal with it every day then, although they didn't deal with Kochim either. We do have Bavli on Kochim for various reasons. They felt that was very important to deal with and to learn and to understand. But Taharot, we don't have a Bavli, we only have a Yerushalmi for it. But here's one of the sugyot where the ideas of Tumah and Tahara enter, and they come. And we finished off yesterday's that this idea of Tumah is not only Tumah that comes from a dead body or from a shiur or from the other things that we learn about, but Tumah can also be generated by choices and by actions. When we make certain choices and certain actions, that too can generate Tumah. And we need to be more sensitive. We're not sensitive to the actual energy of Tumah and Tahara. We talked yesterday about how we can become a little bit more sensitive to it, but at least we need to be, to some degree, have understanding of what Tumah and Tahara is. How can we call ourselves spiritual beings if we have no idea of the principles of spiritual energy? And Tumah and Tahara are one of the most basic areas of how spiritual energy passes through the world. So we have the privileged opportunity of understanding something about it as we learn the areas of Tumah and Tahara. It's interesting that today, although the shiur will be broadcast tomorrow, the day after Yom Ha'atzmaut. We're having the shiur today on Yom Ha'atzmaut. And we're saying many shuls, the prayer for the states includes a prayer of Reshit Tzmichat Geulateinu. May this be the beginning of the Geula. If we were serious about that, wouldn't we be learning Tumah and Tahara? It's like a child saying, I want a car, I want a license, I want to drive. Okay, start learning the rules of the law, of the road. No, I just want to drive. I really want to drive. We want to drive now. And may this be the beginning of my driving experience. But I'm not learning the rules of the road. So we're clearly not serious. Reshit Tzmichat Geulateinu, we don't mean it. If we really believed that this was Reshit Tzmichat Geulateinu, we would learn the laws of Tumah and Tahara already, so that we're prepared and that we're ready for it. The fact that we just skip over it means we don't take it seriously. We think this is the ultimate reality. So there's an opportunity to at least become familiar with the laws of Tumah and Tahara to some degree. The piece of Gemara that we've got is based on the Mishnah on DAF YOMI SOTA. And the section that we're talking about in the Mishnah on DAF YOMI SOTA is based on a pasuk in Parashat Shmini we had a few weeks ago. Very fascinating principle in Tumah and Tahara. An earthenware, a clay pot, into which a sheretz falls. It doesn't touch the walls of the tree. So sheretz again is one of those 8 insects which is recently died. So it is a source of tumah. Think of it as radioactive material. It puts out a destructive energy called tumah. We don't understand it, and that's part of the interesting part of learning tumah. We're learning about things we can't understand. We know how to reason. It's like mathematics. You know how to mathematically reason, and our piece of Gemara uses some of that reasoning, but we don't really understand how it works. Somebody who practices Chinese medicine was explaining to me only yesterday that in Western medicine we ask the why. Why is this working? Why, if you take this drug, is it going to have this effect? We're always worried about the why. The Chinese say, who cares about the why? We know that. We've studied for hundreds and hundreds of years. We know A causes B, B causes C. If you do X, then Y will be. We know that. It doesn't matter why. What's important is to know what. And in Kodshim and Tarot, you can't deal with the whys because you're dealing with something that's far too spiritual. That your mind gets used to submitting itself to a divine system of reasoning that isn't human-centric. Nashim and Nazikin is human-centric. You're dealing with the relationships and with business. It's about human beings. And as Reb Shimon Shkop says, you're meant to use your rational logic brain and mind in order to understand those pieces of Torah. But when it comes to Tarot and Kodshim, you can't. So it's not human-centric. So it allows us to leave our intellectual ego on the side and engage totally in God's way of reasoning, understanding the what and the how, but not the why. So it's a very fascinating piece. Most of Shas, we want to understand the why as well. Here you understand the what and the how, you can't understand the why. So what is the what and the how? And here you've got this part, an insect, a radioactive insect, an insect that is tomei and that is dead, falls into the airspace of the container. Then in the container, there's some food. That food becomes tamei, although there's no physical contact between the sheretz, the source of the tumah, and the food. The food is in the pot. The sheretz is in the air of the pot, but never actually touched the pot. The food still becomes tamei. And you've got to break the pot. There's nothing you can do with the pot. Can't get it in. Rashi explains that a kli cheres, an earthenware kli, only causes tumah when it's air, when it's inside, its volume, the container is what causes the tumah. Interesting idea. And therefore, it's metame. What else? It becomes tamei because of something in the air of the pot, and it causes tamei through the air, tumah through the air of the pot. And that you need to break it. You can't take it to the mikveh. So that's where our Mishnah deals with this. We'll have an opportunity to look at that. But there's a very important piece of Rambam in his introduction to Seder Tarot. The beginning of Seder Tarot, the Rambam introduces us to this whole area. And I just want to touch on some of the things the Rambam says. In the first paragraph that I've brought here, the Rambam gives us some very foundational principles of education, of learning in general. And he says here at Teda, and this is something we're suffering from today, Teda al pet chila kol ha'akdamot shikdamti b'mavor zeh. Before you try and understand Tarot, know the principles I've described to you in this introduction by heart. And that's something today the children will often even say, if you ask a child to know the alphabet, they might say, I don't need to know the alphabet. You can search on Google. I don't need to know what letter comes before what. You just search and it comes. And the importance of knowing things by heart. You see the Rambam said, actually he calls it shagul b'ficha she'belichi titztarek la'ametz machshavta kedei l'zachro. So that when you're working with the ideas, you can manipulate the ideas in your mind without having to consciously recall them. It's a different logic. You've got to put yourself into a different space and think in an entirely different way. So some of the principles on the next page of the sources, some of the principles is, he just runs through them, just give you an idea of the structure. That all the different types of tumah, he says, are all sourced by a living being. No tumah other than one is sourced by a non-living being. It's either a human or an animal. Zulata tzarachi mitama begadim va'kirot v'lishi adam motza'a. Only with tzarat, situations where tzarat can strike an inanimate object without any human or animal involvement. But apart from tzarat, it's always human or animal generated. And then he brings that there are 11 sections of tumah. Sheretz, nevelo, meis, tumah, there are 11 different sections. And in each of those sections, there are a number of avot. Avot are the foundational generators of tumah. Things that start the tumah off. And there are altogether 32 such principles. And then he goes into what is a kli, what is a utensil, because that's an important thing to understand in tumah. And it's clothes, begadim, and sak, and cloth, and kelim in the kitchen, and leather things, and things made from bone, and things made from glass, and things made from metal. Glass is tomei midrabbanan. Everything else is tomei midoraisa. So you get an idea. So the Rambam says, study my hakdama, study my introduction, get the principles clear by heart, otherwise you will struggle. You will never really get it unless you know the principles by heart. Those are the rules of Tumah and Tarot. Let's have a look at our Mishnah very quickly. It says the Mishnah, Bo b'yom darash Rabbi Akiva. On that day, Rabbi Akiva learned a posuk in the Torah. This posuk that we've just learned. On what day was that? Says Rashi. In Brachos we say, whenever it says on that day, Hu Yom She'Shivor Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah L'Nesiut. It's the day that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, at a very young age, was made the Nasi. Shenitrabu Talmidim, and he had a view of let people come and learn. Don't be selected. Let anybody who wants to learn come and learn. The yeshivas burgeoned and became very full because before him was Raman Gamliel. And he used to say, Kol Talmid Chacham she'en tocho kebaro al yikanes lebeis hamedrash. Any Talmid Chacham whose inside is not like his outside, who isn't authentic, we've had this in recent Matmonim, what that really means. Any Talmid Chacham who is not authentic in his inside and his outside shouldn't come into the Beis HaMedrash. So Rabbi Gamliel was very selective, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was not. And it was on that day that Rabbi Akiva got up and learned from this pasuk. And it doesn't say tamei ela yitma. It doesn't say that the food in this pot becomes tamei. It says the food in the pot yitma can make something else tamei. Letamei acherim limed al ikar sheni shemetamei et hashlishi. You see from here that even if a piece of food is affected by a second level of tumah, that means there's an ava tumah that causes a rishon, a sheni, and even if it's a sheni, it's a second level tumah, it can still infect a third level. It can still transmit the tumah. It hasn't diluted so far that it can no longer be metamei a third level. And then Rabbi Yeshua says, oh, Rabbi Yeshua, if only you were here, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, you once said that one day somebody will come and will argue that a loaf of bread that is affected by tumah at a third degree, from an av to a rish sheni shlishi comes, that will be undone. Somebody will argue it doesn't have the power to be mitzameh to cause any other tumah. And Rabbi Akiva, your Talmud, works it out from the word yitma instead of the word tameh. Yitma implies it has the capacity to cause tumah, not only to be tameh. So there are two things we've always got to look at. Is it something which is tameh? Is this something which can generate tumah? And Rabbi Akiva really deals with that section. If you look at the second page of the source sheet at the bottom, the Rambam explains very clearly what is going on in the Mishnah. So if something falls into the kli that doesn't touch the walls of the kli, the kli still becomes tameh. The kli now becomes a rishon. The sheretz, the insect, was an av, a foundational one. The utensil is now first degree tumah. And the food in the pot is sheni l'tumah. Because it was infected, contaminated by a kli which is a rishon. So you have the insect, rishon, the kli, sheni, the food. Here we say, and here we say in this Mishnah that this bread, this loaf of bread which is in the container, can cause tumah to something else. It is a second degree tumah, and it can cause a third degree tumah. Can cause other tumah other food to become tameh. You see, the second degree can cause a third degree. And that's not the halacha, but that's what the Mishnah says, and the Gemara goes into that. So we begin to see it's just to become familiar with this idea of an ava tumah, a rishon tumah, a sheni tumah, a shlishi tumah, just to be aware that these things exist and that these energies are in the world, and then to understand the Gemara that we learned yesterday in Yuma. Al teshatzu et nafshotechem b'kol sheretz hashuretz. Don't disgust yourself by becoming tamei through a sheretz. Says Rabbi Shmuel in the Gemara, don't think that tumah is only caused by the avota tumah that are listed in the Torah. Yes, that's where we learn the whole principle of tumah. But once we know how tumah works, then you've got to become much more sensitive to principles of tumah. You've got to become much more sensitive and to realize and understand the importance of tumah and to become to some degree sensitized to it. And that's the piece of Gemara that we go into here as we develop principles and ideas of tumah and ta'avot.